Now, let's go chunking out a bit and talking about the big picture. And I'm going to invite Stephen Kennedy, who's Director of Solutions over at eGain, to talk to us about some of the Megatrends. Gosh, have we got more of those these days than we used to have? So, what's the context? Is this a UK perspective, a European perspective, a global one that you're going to take on?
Hi, Martin. I'm going to be looking at it from a global perspective, looking at how big things are coming, especially as we come out of the whole pandemic situation, and what's next on the horizon, basically.
Oh, brilliant.
Trying to understand how what your previous speaker was talking about with regard to MPS and how you can monitor that, measure that, and make it better. And I think that's the key factor as we move beyond COVID. It's how do we make things better?
Yeah. So important headlights for the future. So let me give you the stage, Stephen, and then let's get into some Q&A after that.
Thanks very much indeed. I really appreciate it, Martin. So just Martin's introduced it. We're talking about customer service megatrends for 2022 and beyond and how you can actually excel at doing it. And I think that's a key factor. So there are about 5 that we're going to have a look at very, very quickly, understanding what they are. And one of the biggest things is that digital is going to become more and more prevalent in what we do. Okay, it's going to adopt. We're going to see an increase in adoption. We did when we went into COVID. We were forced into that situation. But coming out, I think it's going to grow more and more. The avenues, the choices that we have of remaining in the digital frame are going to get better and bigger. And like I said, pandemic triggered it. Let's get onto it and let's get it moving as quickly can. We got into a habit of doing things digitally. So that's going to become more and more sticky as we go through. Okay. We've seen that there's been a 65% increase in online grocery shopping over the pre-pandemic levels. And I think that's important. If you look at the financial institutions, they're seeing this 120% increase in that digital concept as well. So more and more digital is the first trend. The second trend is that people are going to be doing more with digital. We dealt with certain aspects during the COVID period, and now we're going to start to see doing more with digital grow stronger and stronger. Consumers are starting to want to do more with digital or through digital channels. They don't want to be restricted to only certain aspects of what's going on. So some of the use cases that we're going to see improve and enhance, video calls with doctors, yes, they take place already, but they're going to become stronger. They're going to offer us more. Looking at a loan application, that end-to-end journey, from filling in a form all the way through to the submission for that approval, it is going to become more digital, more digitalized. Things are going to tie in greater. And I think as we progress forward, we're going to find that systems are going to be integrated a lot smoother, a lot neater, and that's going to then strengthen that whole digital approach to how we can start to get bots to talk to the back-end systems to pull information through which can be usable. So instead of necessarily having just an agent having to tie those together, it's going to be automated more and more. The third trend we're going to look at is that knowledge is going to be used to guide digital more and more. Okay, so you're going to have a knowledge guided digital. And I think this is something that's really starting to show its face more and more. Gartner is saying that CEOs are looking to spend more money on knowledge to improve everything that they're doing. Blue chip leaders are investing more and more in that knowledge component to make sure it's right. Okay, one thing to remember is that right at the beginning of the pandemic, our digital attempt, especially from a VA or a virtual assistant perspective, was we gave it the ability to do only a certain frame. Now we're seeing that it's going to need to be doing more and more. And quite often we talk about the fact that if you are not going to offer a digital that's intelligent, then don't offer it at all, because it's going to cost you more in the long run. We're going to see that there is more and more modernization of the knowledge management, especially for digital. That fact that different digital formats require different knowledge formatted. It should be one knowledge article that you're creating, but have multiple views depending on how it's being presented. So the power of the knowledge systems that we're starting to see being used to provide different views for different channels is going to be important. The fourth trend is that you're going to start to see more proactive digital. And this is quite an interesting take on life, because historically, customer service has always engaged with a customer because they've contacted us. They've engaged with us. There's an issue. Let's deal with it. What we're seeing more and more is that it's going to become proactive. We know within our companies what our customers' journey is. We know when they start, what their step is in 3 months' time, what their step is in 6 months' time. So instead of waiting for them to contact us, why don't we be proactive and start engaging with them ahead of the time so that they're aware something's coming up before it actually happens. So more and more, we're going to see a more proactive outbound customer service that will then reduce the amount of calls coming into the call center. Okay, that positive affirmation rather than waiting for a question to be asked. Okay. One of the sad things is that a lot of these are going to be siloed to start off with, but then we're going to see them come together more and more, that you're doing things where you're looking at a customer not just for this particular instance, but you're starting to look at the customer as a value to your organization from cradle to grave, understanding how things tie together. So that proactive customer engagement will become stronger, giving people information ahead of the time before they need it. And Gartner reckon that by 2025, the proactive customer engagements will outnumber reactive customer engagements. So quite a huge jump there. So how we came to all of this is just as important as those 5 different mega trends that we're seeing. Just a little bit about eGain very, very quickly. We were founded in 1997. We've got headquarters in Sunnyvale, and we are geared to that customer engagement automation solution, that digital engagement through artificial intelligence, using knowledge management and analytics to drive the success. And I think tying those 3 things together will support all the mega trends that I spoke about earlier on. The fact that through your digital engagement driven by knowledge, you're able to be proactive, you're able to understand where we're going and how we need to get there for a customer. And like your previous speaker said, that whole NPS score is equally important. And if you can derive that NPS by providing high level of digital capabilities, it'll only do you good. So from an eGain perspective, a lot of our customers use this entire platform to actually achieve that. The circle on the outside are all the different channels, all the different ways that you come through. The middle piece, although it looks confusing, can actually be broken down into 3 areas, and that's what's going to make your digital platform better. Naturally, you still have to use the integrations to the back-end systems to support this platform play. So if you look at it, you've got your conversation hub, that piece that actually communicates or connects you to your customers. You've got the knowledge hub, which contains AI and machine learning, which brings all the intelligence together to tie the digital channels together, pulling data from the bottom systems into the fore so that they can be used everywhere. And then finally, we have Analytics Hub on the right-hand side, which is what you use to continually improve, manage, and change what you're actually doing. So to give you a very, very quick example, a large British multinational bank increased their first call resolution by doing this to 90%. That's a huge jump from the 70%. They reduced their average call handling time by 67 by providing agents with that intelligent, connected information around their customer. So it's not a customer that you're looking at just for this interaction. It's your customer as a whole and how they've interacted with you throughout everything. And if I look right down the bottom of the utility company, that 50% reduction in agent training time is huge, especially as we see agents swapping in and out different call centers all the time. Okay, bringing everything together. Just a couple of others, and then we'll move on very, very quickly. We're talking about a retail here who serves over 9 million shoppers across all sorts of geographies. And I think, one of the biggest things is by going digital, you're able to deflect 60% of inbound calls through to a virtual assistant, moving that digital. And that virtual assistant could be front-ending anything, Apple Business Chat, WhatsApp messaging, whatever. It gives you that capability to develop it once and reuse it multiple times. And they've been very successful in taking that on board and actually using it very, very effectively. In a communications company, telco, they serve around 30 million customers, and looking at how they can do things very, very quickly, very, very easily. And one of the nice things about going digital, it means that you can have multi-skilled, multi-branded teams servicing more than one instance of a customer. So basically, knowledge everywhere, digital everywhere, agents can do all questions. Now, very, very quickly before we end, just a quick call to action. If you want to see this actually happen, we do offer you that capability through an Innovation in 30 Days plan, where we can actually show you some of the experiences that other customers have had and how you can address those 5 megatrends that we spoke about right in the beginning. Now, Martin, that was very, very quick. I know we've only had such a short period of time, but let's hand over to you.
Yeah, that's cool. I think that's a good overview of stuff, and I think it's brought in a topic that we do need to cover and think about today, which is knowledge. I think that's hugely important. Again, long-term fan of it. You know, it's one of those areas that you can build it, leave it, it decays, and you start again, and all the rest of it. And there's been quite a journey over the many, many years that people have been trying to get this done. So I suppose my question is really focused upon, in a world of increasing intelligence through ML, other technologies in the AI basket, how has knowledge management gotten easier and more realistic in terms of helping customers help themselves, in terms of helping agents help themselves? Is it as laborious and dreadful as it used to be, or are we now in a new era? Give us a sense of what knowledge management is about in today's world.
So I think that you raise a very, very unique concept there, in the fact that knowledge management has become easier. When I started in knowledge management 20 years ago, we were looking at the base foundation. We were putting in complex teams to actually produce and maintain the high level of knowledge. We were also looking at making thousands of articles, because you needed one for every different view, or one for different persons who've got it. I think now, with knowledge that's being made available today, it gives you that capability to create knowledge once and reuse it in multiple places, which means that your overhead is so much more reduced. It also means that the team that you have maintaining that knowledge becomes so much better coordinated amongst themselves to be able to do things quickly and easily. Now, the advent of, when you talk about how does a customer benefit from it and how does an agent benefit from it, I think the most important part there is the fact that knowledge should never be stagnant. The minute you have stagnant knowledge, you lose a hell of a lot. So you've got to look at feedback loops back into the knowledge to make sure it's addressing the right question at the right time. And that's where the analytics comes into it, where you analyze how your knowledge is being used and then make sure it's relevant to that particular moment in time.
Yep.
Making sure language morphisms that take place are still kept up to date in your knowledge.
You could argue that YouTube is the biggest knowledge library in the planet. And it's no coincidence that that's a visual medium. So
very much so. I would say to you that, to me, from a knowledge perspective, YouTube is more an information store.
Okay.
Knowledge is really information that's being used at an appropriate time to solve or to answer a particular question. And I think that's one great difference between how we should be viewing stuff. It's proven answers.
I'm cool with that. I suppose it was a segue into asking whether or not our output is still primarily text-based, or is increasingly becoming more visual in a world where fish have got longer attention spans than humans, reputedly.
You are so right. I think the more visual we become, the more graphical the more graphical things we support. It does make life a lot easier. And we've seen how, over the years, different types of technology allows us to become more graphical in whatever we do. So yes, the more the click and the point is far easier and far better to use, or even using voice interactions make it so much easier to use from a knowledge perspective. You are correct.
Would you ever advise me, if I had analysed my customers and said that, for the sake of simplicity, 50% use a desktop, 50% use a smartphone, that therefore my presentation of that information should be calibrated to those different, screens, and indeed possibly the attention span that's associated with that as well?
Very much so. I think we're finding knowledge now is a lot shorter and it's a lot sharper and to the point than what it used to be a long time ago. And that definitely goes along the lines of the channels that we're using to access knowledge is now in a much smaller frame than what it used to be. Yes, you can get large phones with large screen space, but at the end of the day, you've got that very short time to deliver a message very, very quickly.
And is knowledge these days being served up in conversational bite-sized chunks through virtual assistants as well? Is that another trend within knowledge management, that let's just get me to give you a headline, and if you want more, you can ask me a question, I'll access the second paragraph, so to speak, or the relevant component within that, and we consume it in that much more interactive way?
I think you are right in that understanding, very much so. I think the whole idea of the VAs is they're pulling out a conversational approach to what you're going on, and if you do need to delve further, you can ask for more. But if you switch that back into the contact center as well, exactly the same thing can happen there, where you're providing short answers which an agent can use in whatever channel that they need, but there's the backup of all the information should they need it. So you're creating one piece of knowledge which has got snippets depending on the frame that you're using, but you've got the full supporting documentation available if more information is required.
Got it.
Very much so.
Yeah, and I can remember ages ago on this conference when it was much smaller, there was a guy who was actually put in charge of customer service in a startup who was actually an engineer, didn't really want the job at all. And he said, I dealt with it, I found out what the customers want, I worked out my top 3 things they always ask me, I went to town on those and I got rid of the rest. And whilst that was an extreme perspective, I think there was a message in there which is to do with the ongoing curation of knowledge. You know, you can end up with far too much stuff. And again, what's some of your tips around of how do you keep things clean, up to date, relevant, so that the customer actually gets what they want rather than having to talk to someone?
You know, you mentioned that. I remember one of the very first customers I ever worked with, they had a team of people who were creating something like 50,000 articles of knowledge a month.
There you go.
in reality, I think the guys on the front line were probably using 5 or 6 of those knowledge articles on a regular basis.
Yeah.
So what we try and suggest is that you make sure that as your users, agent or customer, are searching for knowledge, you are monitoring the keywords, you are monitoring what they're asking, because that's going to drive the type of knowledge that you need to create.
Yes.
And it is that continual refresh that you need to keep in mind as you go through this. The other thing is, don't rely purely on machine learning, because unfortunately, machine learning, as we've seen in the past, can lead to very bad misinterpretation of stuff.
Yes.
And bad delivery. So rather have that human curated process involved as well, that final, yes, this is the correct path to follow. But also, linguistics changes all the time. So when you're building your knowledge, you've got to make sure that you have that capability to refresh that very, very quickly. I think one of your first initial questions you asked right in the beginning was, how do you see this changing? And I think that ability to refresh and quickly modify stuff has changed hugely, which brings us that ability to keep things refreshed and keep your knowledge base as small as you can.
Yep.
You know, you talk about your example was where they had 3. I remember us dealing with a retail company here in the UK, and they built knowledge around turkeys. They built 20 articles over Christmas, and they cut their calls into their call center by 50%, just with 20 articles on the website.
Yep. Yep.
So focus on those things that are really creating holes for you. And then to tie it back into your speaker as well, go to the root of the problem and resolve the root. Don't use knowledge as a sticky plaster over the top. Bring the whole company on board, that if there's something that's causing you pain at the front end, fix it at the back end so that it doesn't happen.
Got it. And it's got to be a very quick response to this, but you don't need to be thinking of knowledge sitting in a single bucket. It can be distributed in a number of places. Is that still the state of what's possible these days?
Very much so. In fact, it's probably better now than what it used to be. The fact that you can single source an article from multiple endpoints. And I think that's key. Yeah.
Okay. We're out of time, but that was a really fascinating little glimpse in there. Thank you for bringing us up to speed around of knowledge. It's absolutely critical. And in fact, your Megatrends, I suppose you could really say that the enabler of all of that is the knowledge layer.
Very much so.
You know, at the end of the day. So thanks for that. Expert as ever, Steve. Loved it. Thank you very much.
Have a great day.
You too.
Yes, bye-bye.